Right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good evening, wherever you are on YouTube. We're live here with Linda Mandin. This is the ToC Show, and we've got a few folk here joining in the background from all around the world, actually, but there's a few who've signed in from Australia where it's very early in the morning. So we've got Linda here, who is in Sydney, and she's going to talk today. We're going to have a bit of a conversation around some slides that she's prepared about the lessons that she's picked up, and not just picked up, actually, thought about and analysed and studied from Eli Goldratt's, one of his more difficult but more meaningful, more thoughtful books, The Choice. So when I first met Linda, well, actually, it was probably 18 months ago when we first sort of started working together, in the background of Linda's room, and I think you can see some little red dots on her wall and a sort of a white sheet that's blurred out just there. Linda had analysed The Choice, and she'd gone through and used the thinking tools, sort of a hybrid of them, to help her understand it. And now you guys get to benefit from that, because whether or not you've read The Choice, this is the every man's, every woman's, every person's version of The Choice. It's not dumbed down, it's just simplified up so that ordinary folk can get their head around it. So I think you'll find it very interesting and actually very useful if you start to think about how to put some of this into practice. So, Linda, young lady,
thank you,
do you want to just take it from there?
Sure. Thanks, Clark.
I can't hear you.
Oh, well, I'm not on mute.
No, I am. Sorry, that's my fault. Sorry, Linda, that was a very sloppy little, I turned the volume down. Go for it.
Okay, so you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Clark. Thanks, everybody else, for participating and turning up today. So as Clark said, yeah, I did read The Choice from Eli Goldratt. I actually stumbled upon it when I was going through Clark's website, and I noticed that he had a recorded interview with Eli Goldratt. And so because I'm super keen and interested in the teachings of Eli Goldratt, I thought I would listen to it. And there's a lot of stuff in that recorded interview, but one of the things that was touched on was this book called The Choice. So, of course, I love learning new stuff. So I thought, oh, let me just Google it and find out what this book is about. Let me see if I can source it. So I found a copy of it, I bought it, and I read it. And really what the book is about is, as it says here, it's about living a full life, whatever that means to you personally. What I've done today is pretty much just done what I'm calling the whistle stop tour. It's going through what the decisions are that help you live that full life, and talking about the obstacles that we need to overcome. So I would like you, as a consequence of this, hopefully you'll come away with a greater appreciation that the power of clarity of thought has, and how you can actually apply that, not just in business, where a lot of people tend to apply theory of constraints, but also in personal relationships, family, etc. So the book is about how you view reality and how you get yourself out of your current reality to hopefully get to a better reality and a clearer reality. And the book is actually written as a discussion between Eli and his daughter, Efrat. And in the second edition of the book, which is the book that I read, Efrat has done actually a lot of the heavy lifting by summarising what the lessons that she learned from her father, and she's put them into some kind of a summarised structure and format. All I did was I read the book and then I read the notes, and I basically assembled those notes together into one whole picture. Rather than having as little segments, I put them into one whole picture and made some other connections to help me understand it. And I put it on my wall because that's one of the ways that I remember and learn. And it's a visual reminder to me to get myself out of a particular reality and a particular mindset and move to something else. And the beauty of it was, because as Clark said, when people, I'm on a lot of webcams a lot of the time. I'm lucky enough in the company that I work with that I interact with a lot of people. And often I don't have my background blurred. And people see this thing on my wall and they go, Linda, what's that? So I don't know if it's fortunate for them or not, but they get a crash course in what Eli Goldratt wrote in The Choice. So from my perspective, they get a little crash course and learn, and it helps reinforce to me the message and the lessons. So I found it actually really useful. So let's get started. So in summary, what Eli is saying in his book is that in order to live a full life, we have to have enough meaningful success in our life. And in order to have meaningful success, we actually need the stamina such that we can overcome failure and setbacks, things that go wrong, or things that, just block us from moving forward. We also need to have a lot of opportunities, and I've written enjoy many opportunities. It means that we can take advantage of opportunities. But part of enjoying many opportunities is actually being able to recognize that they're there in front of us, or being able to generate them from what we know from around us. So the other element of being able to enjoy and have meaningful success is the ability to collaborate with people. So most of what we do in a connected society relies on other people. And in order to be able to collaborate well with them, then if you can't do that, you're going to really be hampered in terms of achieving what you're doing. And I know the work that Chris does, and Chris is on this call, with his 7 motivating factors and his hum profile, that's actually a really good skill, things to learn as well to help collaborate with people. So in order to be able to have the stamina, enjoy the opportunities, and to collaborate, another really important element is the ability to think clearly. And when we think clearly in this respect, we're talking about the ability to have a deep understanding of cause and effect relationships. And that doesn't mean, so that means in systems, but it also means in, personal reactions and relationships as well. Now, in order to think clearly, there's 4 main principles or mindsets that we need to adopt. And each of these mindsets has a particular obstacle, i.e. how we operate and how we view our current reality, that we need to overcome. So the first obstacle that we need to overcome is to think that reality is complex. Instead, we want the perception to view reality as simple, because that helps us unlock simple solutions rather than complicated solutions. The second obstacle that we want to overcome is the expectation that there's always going to be conflicts. We just can never get around conflicts. And again, what we want, what Eli is suggesting is that really our mindset should be that, yep, there are conflicts, but we can actually remove every one of those conflicts. It's just about looking for them and knowing how to remove them. The third obstacle is that we tend to blame others. And when we're blaming others, we're pointing the finger at people rather than actually looking at what the problem is. So not only does that harm us in terms of being able to collaborate with people, but it also harms us in terms of looking in the right direction for a solution. So instead of blaming others, we want to actually adopt a sense that there is always a win-win outcome in a solution. That doesn't mean that we seek to compromise. It means that we look to get the best of everything for both, or however many parties that there are involved. And the final obstacle is that we think we know. Now, this was the hardest one for me to get my head around. What does that mean, we think we know? In essence, what Eli Goldratt is saying is that when we think we know all that there is about a particular situation, we stop looking for ways to substantially improve that situation. So that's what we think we know is. So what I'm going to do on our whistle stop tour this morning is to actually go through each of those 4 obstacles and talk a little bit more about what they are and how we can move from that obstacle mindset into the new mindset. I was going to ask, actually, before we moved on, how many people have read The Choice in terms of the people who are on the call today? Okay.
Just scrolling down here just to see, we've got, I think we've got pretty good numbers there on having read The Choice.
Okay, cool. Excellent. The other question I wanted to ask, in terms of what a full life is, I would like you each just, take a minute and let me know. You can write it in the chat or you can keep it to yourself, whatever, what you think a full life means to you. So just take a minute to just think about what that means. If we were to share, and I'm not going to ask you to, but if we were to share, I would suspect that we would each have a different definition about what a full life means. Some of them, there may be similarities, but I suspect that they would all be in some part different. Yep, and people are writing things down. Excellent.
Do you want me to just read them out just quickly for you?
Okay.
So we got, because people watching on YouTube, so Michael here has added that he's quarter way through the choice. Keep going.
Cool.
Keep going.
Yes,
I thought it's worth it. Chris said, get a degree, raise a family, write a book. Yep, like all those. Sandesh is work-life harmony. Oh, I think that's a good one. Contributing back to society. Yeah, I think that's a driver for a lot of us. A full life for Yusi is to be fulfilled in everything I do. I like that. Keith says health, wealth, and happiness. And I said leaving a legacy of thought, which sounds really pretentious now that I read it back.
But it's a good one. Yeah, so all of those are really wonderful. And I think that if we, if each of us got what we wanted out of a full life, we'd be super happy. But it's not a but it's an and. So what Ellie is saying, and what I truly believe, is that these 4 obstacles will help every one of you, even though every one of you has a different definition about what a full life means.
Yeah.
And Michael, you are a quarter of the way through it. One of the other things that I would like to just say to people, this is a whistle-stop tour this morning. If you really do want to, if you were intrigued or interested and to go further, I would really suggest you read the book. It'll go much deeper than what I'm going to go through today, and it'll give you potentially greater insight. So I do recommend you read the book.
I'm just getting a little comment there that I'd not realised when you showed me the slides earlier. Think clearly is a prerequisite for all of those other things. So think clearly, and that helps you with the top one: stamina to overcome failure and success. You get to get many opportunities to collaborate. If you can't think clearly, you end up not doing all those other things, and you kind of get stopped in your tracks, don't you? Figuratively speaking. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
And think clearly it's kind of the shorthand for applying the logical thinking tools, because all of those things do help you think clearly. It's also the reminder that I've got to shift some of the baggage that I bring to me when I think about things, so that I can, energize myself to just accept that, I have failed at something. But failure is, many steps of mastering your expertise, right? So you want to keep pushing forward.
I like that.
So where's my mouse? Okay, so the first obstacle that we want to overcome is that reality is complex. Instead, we want to enter things with the fact that we want to think of things as reality as being simple. And as the quote on the left-hand side says, when we expect things to be complex, we tend to actually look for complicated and complex solutions, instead of looking for the simple solutions. Now, it's true that reality is, does seem complex. Everything that we've got around us, all the things that we seem to work in, just tells us that it's complicated and complex. But there are ways that we can take ourselves out of that mindset. So first thing I would like you just to have a look at is this really childish rough drawing that I've got here. It's representing 2 systems. System A and System B. I would like you just to have just to yourself, what you think is the more complicated system. Is it A or is it B? Oftentimes, we would describe System B as the complicated system because there's many parts to it. And when we're troubleshooting and trying to work through things, what we tend to do is describe our system, and we describe every element in that system. So when there's a lot of elements in the system, that description effort is a lot of work. And trying to just keep it all in your head and where it's all going is also a lot of work. So in that definition, B is absolutely more more complex. But if you were to apply a scientific definition of simple, and remember that Eli Goldratt has a science background. So he applied a science definition of simple, which basically says that simple is designated by the entry points into a system. So if we look at System A, there are 4 entry points into that system. If we look at B, there is 1 entry point into that system, which is over here. So based on that definition, we would say that System B is the more simple system. And the other insight is that when you have a system that has lots of connections, i.e. one thing happens, then another thing happens, and this is really where you're looking at your cause and effect relationships, knowing that a change in one part of the system, because everything's connected, will have a ripple effect, just like dominoes. It will have a ripple effect through the rest of the system. So when you're looking for solutions, knowing that one change can have a ripple effect right through a solution means that that's also another indicator of simplicity. I can make one change and it'll have multiplying effects through a connected system. And in theory of constraints, what we learn, especially when we're looking at things like current reality trees and future reality trees, is that the closer you make a change to the base of that tree or the entry point of the system, the bigger the effect of that change. So what we want to do is, instead of thinking about things as complex, we want to start thinking about things as simple. And what we want to do is actually think about the predictability of systems and the predictability of behaviors. And we know that, and what that means is that we know that if X happens, Y is likely to follow. It's like when you put your hand next to a hot flame, you know that you're going to get heat, you may get burnt, but you're also going to take your hand away. So what Eli is saying is that if you think of the rules as a system and you learn to find out what those rules are, then it's easier to view the system as simple. You just need to look for those rules. That'll help guide you. The other thing is that you want to understand that eventually all issues and all causes of issues converge. So if you dig deep enough, if you dig long enough, you'll get to the bottom of this iceberg, or you'll get to the roots of a problem. And what you will do is you'll generally find that the causes of all these problems become, narrower and narrower. They're all pointing to a single or a few things. Now, one of the ways that you can do to get to this point quickly is to ask people about those big persistent problems, those things that they're commonly complaining about, the ones that seem to have been around forever and that just seem to be unsolvable. Now, they may still feel unsolvable if we don't change our mindset on those other 3 obstacles. So all of these obstacles that we're going to talk through, you need to think about them as leveraging off each other and helping each other. Now, one of the things that we say in here, and what Eli is saying, is that don't let these big problems just hide in plain sight. And what we mean by that is that often people just don't even talk about them anymore. They just go, well, that's just the way it is around here. Why bother about it? We just can't change that. And what you're doing is, acknowledging that there's this big big problem that you've given up on any hope that you can actually do anything about it. And by giving up on that hope, you're actually limiting yourself to actually being able to think about it in a different way, to change it, etc. You're also limiting yourself to ever getting down to what that root cause is, because you've just eliminated a whole point of inquiry from what you're doing. So look for those big persistent problems. This image here, I put this here purposefully, and I would like you guys to have a little think about why I might have put that image there and how that might help in this mind shift to perception of reality is simple. If you want to throw something into the chat, have a go. What does this image represent? Someone sold the man a moon on a stick. Not quite, but I like the vision.
Okay, guys.
This is where it becomes clear if my illustrative talent is poor. Okay, I'm going to give a clue. This is a balloon.
That's not the moon. Oh, Sandesh says, what will happen if I let go of the thread?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one. Come on, Graham Scott, type faster. I can see you smiling there. You're worried about making spelling mistakes. Yep.
I'm about to blurt it out.
I think it might be, give the answer.
Yeah, okay. Basically what this is, and I'm starting, this is another little skill that I'm trying to practice within myself. It's trying to learn things visually and to have images that I can latch onto to shortcut all the other things that I'm trying to remember. So this one is looking to kids for inspiration, channeling your inner child and being able to ask why. Kids are fabulous at asking, but why, but why? And often when we're trying to resolve and troubleshoot problems, we will ask why, sure, but we will often stop at the first response that we get for a why and accept that, oh, well, that's the reason, instead of actually going deeper and asking another level of why. The first answer that we get to why is rarely the one that's going to lead us to greater insight and those breakthrough solutions. So many of you would have heard of the 5 whys. This is another application of using those 5 whys. So look to your inner child and just keep asking why until you get to an answer that, you know, sounds like it's got some substance to it. Don't just stop at the first one.
Hey, Linda, one of the things about the 5 whys, which I like, and I think you can actually see it on the, actually pop onto your next screen. I think you got the answer there. Could you pop one to the one that you're just going to get that? But one of the things about the 5 whys is when I've tried that, sometimes I put motivations, sometimes I put consequences, sometimes I put causes, and I can list them all out. And I find that if I'm not careful, I can just by asking the 5 whys end up going down a corridor or a route, and I can lead them there, and I can come up with something that feels like it's right. But when you switch it in and put it in the diagrams you're about to show here, you get a far more thoughtful collection of the whys and how they're connected to each other. So I love the idea of finding the 5 why, going why, but what these tools give you is a way of collating them and actually thinking about them and doing it visually. Yeah, which is exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. So what I was just illustrating here is that in the toolkit of the theory of constraints and the logical thinking tools, the current reality tree is a good way to, you know, string all of these things together. And so, like as Sandesh said, you know, what will happen if I let go of the thread? The tool, the current reality tree tool, helps you keep track of those threads, I suppose. These are just examples of trees that I use, and I'm lucky enough to work in an environment where We truly believe in the value of the theory of constraints and the logical thinking tool. So I practice this stuff pretty much every day. So these are trees that I have built or been involved with myself at work. And you'll see that there is various levels of complexity. This one down here is really, really simple. And for those of you who joined the conversation recently around figure 8 loops or druids, this is just an example of one of those. This is a traditional, like fully complex version of a CRT, current reality tree. And here is just a more summarized version of one. But each of them have a converging simple things at the bottom that help explain the resultant effects.
So at the bottom, you've got a root cause.
Sorry.
And then, sorry, I'm interrupting again. So at the bottom, the converging is a word I'm just sort of latching onto there. When you do the thinking and you try and understand it, it converges on all of the stuff at the top. When you go why, and drill down, you converge on a root cause, which is like the roots of the tree there.
Yeah, over here.
The lowly one. Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay, so moving on to the second obstacle is around conflicts, and that we accept that they're always going to be there. So what we want to do is actually think about not going for compromise and going for this win-win solution, or accepting that conflicts can actually be removed. So when we try to resolve conflicts with compromise, we're not actually resolving a conflict. We're choosing to move ahead where one or both parties get something, but not necessarily all of what they are actually looking for or needing. Someone's missing out on something. And some of that might be inconsequential. It might just feel that, compromise is the way to go here. The stakes aren't that high. So yeah, let's go for that. But you haven't really resolved the solution in its entirety. You may have just deferred the problem for a future point in time. You may also miss out on another opportunity, a greater opportunity to achieve better rewards, better outcomes, because you haven't thought in a more novel or expansive way. So what I would like you to take away is to not start thinking about that compromise is the way to go. Don't start looking at that as the go-to, because I want you to attach that to a lowering of expectations for great outcomes. So part of some of the things that you can do to move from a perception that conflicts are always going to be there to a mindset that every conflict can be removed is to start looking for contradictions in situations. Conflicts or contradictions, those things will occur when you've got two people wanting different things, or as an individual, you're faced with two choices. So if you start looking for contradictions within those two choices or those two things, that will start the process of figuring out where that conflict can actually be removed. So once you've found your contradiction, then you want to gather all of the assumptions together. Like, why do we believe that this is true? We want you to challenge all of those assumptions that come with that identification of those conflicts. And this is the important part. Insist that at least one of those assumptions is faulty. So when we go through and we look at our reality, we're saying, well, this happens because, or this happens because. And we believe all those things to be true. So the mindset that we want to adopt is to believe that at least one of those things can't be true. So your mission, the job, is to find out which one of those things is not true.
I like that. That's a really nice framing, Linda, because it's actually saying your job is to at least pretend that the conflict can be broken, and that you'll find at least one assumption that can be broken. And you might not believe that now, but it's true, and at least pretend or insist that it's true. And if you don't, you'll stop. You'll just give up. You prove that the conflict is real. But if you keep going, that's nice. I like the way you put that. Yeah.
Thank you. So these are some of the questions that I kind of throw around when I'm really testing I go, really? Is that really true? You know, what would happen if we stopped doing that? Is that the only way it can be done? And oftentimes I just find that these questions, they seem super simple, but they really stop people in their tracks because they're not used to actually challenging or questioning why something is like it is. And this is especially true when you're looking at those big persistent problems. People just stop thinking about them and questioning them. Mm-hmm. So when we've found all of those faulty assumptions, what we want to do, or sorry, we might not have found all of them. We're finding at least one and we're replacing it with a different reality. And what we're hoping, what should happen is that it breaks those connections between all those other cause and effects that we've got. And it may actually resolve the conflict, the entire conflict, or it may resolve a great many of the undesired effects that we've got coming through. And yes, Josie has just put another question in the chat. Is it always like that? Another question to ask, and that's a good question too. Now, we've got a silly example here just to illustrate what happens when we compromise or seek to average out differences in a solution. So you've got an old-fashioned alarm clock. It goes off at 11:45. But on your watch, you've got another, on your wrist, you've got another old-fashioned appliance, the wristwatch. It's showing you that it's 10:30. And you've promised your mum that you'll pick her up from the train station back in the days when you were able to travel a little bit more. So you don't want to be late. So now you've got this conflict or this contradiction between, well, is it 11:45 or is it 10:30? So this is, you know, a fairly inconsequential decision, but you don't want to be late because it's too difficult to park at the train station. But you don't want to be, you don't want to be early because it's too difficult to park at the train station, but you don't want to be late too because, you know, your mum's elderly and, you know, you want to get her into the car as soon as possible. Yes. So would you ever just like average out the time difference in this situation? Or would you actually seek to try to find out what the real time actually was? So in higher stakes issues, especially like when we're dealing with personal relationship conflicts or with work conflicts, we're torn between those two options, not those two options with the watch, but you are torn between two options. And the stakes are much higher, but typically what would happen is that we become biased with a particular side or particular choice. We take sides in what those choices are instead of trying to get the best out of both sides. And you would never try to, and you often try to just compromise and get an average or some kind of mediocre solution for those things. So what we want to do, and the tool that we can use in this situation is the conflict cloud and or the evaporating cloud. And it actually helps you to reveal what those faulty assumptions are and to, as Clark was saying, break those connections so that we actually realize that there's only one side of this cloud. There is no choice to make now because we have revealed the inaccuracies of these things. In Clark's latest book, the one on corkscrew thinking, he introduces his character of Corkscrew Bob. And it's a really good use of or reminder of that we want to get the best of both. We don't want to compromise and get a little bit of both. We want to get the best of both options or both choices that we've got. So the conflict cloud allows you to test all of those assumptions against what the needs or the goals are of what you're trying to achieve, not just what the wants are or the desires for action and behavior. So the shift in perception about accepting that there are conflicts to accepting that, you know, conflicts can always be removed is an important one. And it brings us actually nicely to our third injection. Did you want to say something, Clark? I can see your...
No. I was just enjoying that, the way you've explained it. So can I just check? The first one was that everything can be as simple if you go looking for the simplicity, to put it in one way. The second one is that if you've got a conflict or a contradiction, Don't just solve it half-assedly. Dig a little deeper, understand it, and then you find you figure out how to untangle it.
Yes.
You feel like that you find the thread to pull to untangle it.
Figure it out.
Everything's simple in terms of cause and effect if you go looking for that, and conflicts can be resolved, not just compromised on, if you go looking for that. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And this again, remember I said I use this in my real life. This is a cloud that I wrote for myself because I was frustrated with I could just never get things done. I just was in meetings all day, and those meetings were valuable. They were helping, others, etc. But I was just never getting anything done. So it was just driving me crazy. And this is not a new conflict. It's something I've struggled with for a long time. And I've always tried various things, and they last for a while, and then, I give up. But this one, this cloud helped me identify and come up with a solution that it's now, and I put this in place at the start of this year. So it's now 9 months in, and I'm still using this injection and finding it wonderful. So this one is really good.
So could you elaborate just a little bit on that? Because I can, so you, on the one hand, use the maker's schedule, which is the person that creates stuff. On the other hand, use the manager's schedule.
A manager's schedule, which is lots of meetings.
Lots of meetings.
So what I basically said, in order for me to get stuff done, I need to be able to contribute to my own productivity, but I also need to contribute to the productivity of others. Yes. So in order to contribute to my own productivity, I use a maker's schedule, which means I've got focused time to do things without interruption. In order to contribute to the productivity of others, I have to use a manager's schedule, which means I'm just constantly in meetings. And maker's schedule, manager's schedule, if you look up Paul Graham and maker's schedule, manager's schedule, you'll see an article that he wrote, which really was an eye-opener for me, and that helped me. But all of these dotted lines with all of these little bullet points, they're all my assumptions that I used to challenge I couldn't do both of these things. I actually now operate both a maker's schedule and a manager's schedule. I have my manager's schedule in the morning and my maker's schedule in the afternoon.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. So I'm just going to bounce off that from selfish reasons, because I think that there are people that do, and this will be common to a lot of people who listen to this later and who are on here, is that there are some people who have maker's schedules, and that's cool. There are some people who have managers' schedules, and sometimes their schedules and ways of working conflict with each other, because the managers are often interrupting the makers, and the makers don't like that. But yes, a lot of us actually live in this conflict here, where we actually do both jobs, where we've got to create stuff and make it, but we've also got to help and manage and influence and teach and all that for other people. And so what you did is you said, I'm going to do both. And then you basically set your diary up, but you know clearly where you are at any one time.
Yes.
That's very elegant. I love that.
Yeah. So that one is working for me.
Nice.
All righty. So our third obstacle, and this is around the tendency to blame others. So what we want to do is actually come from a point of view that there is harmony in nature. Previously, I said, look to the child for inspiration so that we could ask questions. Now we're looking to nature for inspiration. And the reason why we're doing that is because in nature, everything is in harmony with each other, every element of nature. And if we draw that a little bit further, we'll say, well, we are part of nature as humans. We are part of nature. So think of a time in the recent past when you might have had some kind of conflict with somebody else, and think about why that, I'm going to use the word here, disharmony. Why was there disharmony when you were trying to work through that conflict? Oftentimes, when we are thinking about a conflict, we're thinking about a person who contributed or caused a conflict or a problem, or didn't do enough to try to resolve or work with us to fix a problem. So we actually are looking at the person as the problem or as a contributor to the problem rather than the problem itself. And when we look to the person as the problem, in any respect, either as the entirety of the problem or as a contributing factor to the problem, Ellie is saying that likely we're not looking in the right direction for the solution to the problem. And when we're looking at it from a personal perspective, we are becoming defensive and protective of our own interests. So we're fighting the problem, not the person. And if we were to replace the person in a particular conflict, would we still have the same conflict? If we believe that it's the person that's the contributing factor to this issue, and we took that person out of the equation, it's likely that the problem would still actually exist, which proves, therefore, that it's not the person that's the problem. There's something else. So when we start pointing the finger to somebody and we're saying it's a person, we're not only not looking in the right direction, but we're also limiting ourselves to actually finding what that true solution is. And when we blame someone, we increase the amount of disharmony and conflict. So we've got this kind of feedback loop. We'll just never get out of it. We're just escalating the fact that we can't work with a particular person or that they are the cause of these issues. And we never want to do that. We want to have a harmonious situation. So what we're saying is if we want to solve problems and we want to benefit from opportunity, this is one of those areas that we really do need to build that collaboration. And one of the ways that we can help ourselves do this is to not point the finger at people, always look for the problem. The other thing that you can use here is to think and remind yourself, and this is a big one for me, remind myself that people will always act with good intent. It is unlikely that people will come to you and actively try to undermine or be uncooperative or be difficult to work with. And often it is actually that there's things that we don't know about that person or that situation, which is leading them to act the way they are. And a really big one that I've found is that there is a need that they are trying to protect, something that is really important and significant to them, that they are defending, and they're defending it really strongly. And if we don't know what that need is, then it doesn't matter how persuasive or forceful we are, we're never actually going to give them what they need so that they can get what they need to move on. And a really simple way to find out what that need is to actually just ask the question. While we think we may be really great communicators, we often forget to actually talk about why we've got this particular position. And even if we were to say why we've got this particular position, if we're not deep thinkers and we don't have this power of the clarity of thought, we give a superficial reason or something that is actually not the true, deeper underlying reason for something. So this is something that both parties have to work on. Me, as the person wanting to collaborate with someone, I need to ask the question, what is the need that you're protecting here? And I need to have enough skill that I can dig a little bit deeper in that questioning ability. So if that other person is only at a superficial level of being able to communicate that back to me.
Sometimes you don't know, do you? You don't actually even know what your need is, and yet
Yes.
somehow at the same time, we all feel we're quite quick to assume what the motivations and needs of other people are, even though we don't know what our own are. It just, and we usually guess wrongly.
Correct. Yeah. So that's also another area that I've been trying to improve on myself, the ability to ask really good questions and to listen, because you've also got to listen to, you might ask good questions, but if you're not listening for the answers, or you're not listening for the little thread that you can then launch off to ask the next good question, then you're just never going to get much traction with this. So really think about the people are acting with good intent, but there's something about this situation that you don't know, and you're trying to uncover that so that you can move forward. And that's what is going to bring you the harmony. Now,
the other really relevant. Can I? I'm just interrupting again because I just can't help but think of. It just reminded me of like when I read "It's Not Luck," and Alex in the story. Which, if anyone's watching this without having read that before, it's kind of when these tools started coming out, and Eli Goldratt started thinking about these things. But he used his kids as examples. And my kids now are about the same age as his were, you know, the heroes were in the book. And like for reading that book, because I've read that book, I now think I understand that for daughters, which I have, for teenage girls, friendship is you know, a really, really important need. And I think it was far less so for me maybe as a boy or just for me, but without actually having read that book that was written 20 something years ago, I can actually go, so a lot of these things that my daughter's saying, she's kind of justifying them sensibly, but actually it's just about friendship, a lot of them. And I probably need to find a way of asking her if that's what's really important, because it's you know, what goes on in her head is very different to what goes on in mine, and I'm probably being, you know, a silly dad if I assume I can know what she's thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go listen to her.
Okay. The third part of this is growing the cake. Now, really all that means is that when we're looking to compromise, which was, you know, the second obstacle, we're limiting ourselves to what the possible outcomes are. All we know is what's in front of us, so we're trying to work with that. So what we're wanting to do is make the cake bigger so that we can actually get our bigger slices out of the cake. We're not limited to the slice that, you know, currently exists, or the possibility of what currently exists. And again, this comes to the really find those deep hidden needs and issues. So don't be limited to just what's in front of you. Think about what else is out there, because if those things, if there are needs that are not being met and that aren't being discussed, then you are limiting your options for how to resolve those things and how to give people these great big breakthrough outcomes. And one of the things that you want to, you know, consider is that oftentimes having an outsider's view or involvement in trying to look at a situation is going to be really useful here. And one way that you can actually do that, if you don't have access to an outsider, is ask yourself the question, what might you notice if you were noticing this for the very first time? But if you can get an outsider's view, that's a really good perspective. That's a really good option too, because they will uncover. And again, going back to those previous questions, ask, well, why do you do that way? So that's another part of it. Grow the cake. Aim for something that's bigger than what you can see in front of you. Now, with this one, we've shown you a couple of the tools. It's really important here that you use the tools effectively. You're trying to uncover things, and you don't want to use them as a weapon. And I know that even like from my own experience, I am a really curious person, just naturally, and I often ask why. Someone has once said to me that my mild superpower was the ability to ask why. But I also recognize that in my enthusiasm sometimes, I can be quite forceful without realizing it, I can ask why, and it can come across really challenging. So that just further fuels the fire and the defensive mechanisms for people. So be sensitive to how you question and how you use the tools so that you're building collaboration and uncovering needs. You're not just fueling the defensive mechanisms.
That's really good. Linda, a lot of the things you're describing here are, there's the concrete tools, and you can imagine them in a toolkit there, but you can imagine a plumber turns up to your house, and if they're grumpy and unpleasant, it doesn't matter how good their toolkit is, you're going to feel awkward having them, in your house. But if they turn up with a smile, they've got a little bit of that, they stop or they listen, and they might not be the best plumber on earth, but you're probably going to feel much more comfortable. They're probably going to have the tools to do the job. But it's one of those things, I think, with this ToC stuff, is that we can be quite tool oriented and process oriented, and we kind of forget that. Like you've got a lovely smiley face there, and using your personality is much of is at least as important as having the full toolkit. So I got just a quote that Sandesh put in here. It was, and I just wonder if you might react to it. He said, "Tell me how I measure you, and I'll tell you how I behave." It's a quote from Eli Goldratt. If you measure me in an illogical way, do not complain about illogical behavior.
Yeah.
I just wondering, could you react to that?
Well, number one, I agree with it. People have their own way of, everyone actually has sense, right? So they will actually respond in a way that makes sense to them, and they have their own judgment about what they're seeing from others. And if we don't ask the question about, why am I being asked to act in this way, or why are you measuring this? And this is why the power of questioning is so important, that it's a two-way thing. And
Yes.
so, and if you're working with someone who actually isn't that powerful at questioning, it's incumbent on you to be able to provide what's necessary to give them that understanding so they do react in the right way. So something that's illogical to somebody else, you should predict that this might be received as being illogical. So what can I do about changing that understanding before they react to it in a particular way? That's how I kind of think about that one.
You really have to kind of have a nice conversation and get to a point where actually, so I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but this reminds me of a conversation that you and I were in a few, maybe a month or so ago now. I remember there, it was, it felt like it was a conversation that could be very contentious and very difficult, because it was putting a lot of pressure on one person. And so what you did, which I sat back, I thought it was actually really, I think I said afterwards, I thought it was really nice to watch it. You sat back and you just gently drew out the cloud. And I mean that in two ways. You actually literally, we were in Miro and you drew it out on Miro, but you drew it out of the two sides. So we just go, oh, okay, you want that? Okay, cool. No, before we talk about solutions, can I understand why you? And you were really sort of gentle, and you just drew out the needs, what was actually going on in their head, and then you filled out the words, and so the whole conversation was really calm and relaxed and nice. And it was collaborative, but that could have been if you just gone, why you want that, or if you said, well, you want this for this. So it was just very sort of, it was slower, but it was faster, because you got everyone to go.
You got an outcome.
Yeah, and I imagine that was quite hard to do, because I think everyone knew what the answer was, but without going through that process, it could have just ended up in an awkward place. So can I just add a point here from Michael, which there's a really important word in here, Michael. Actually, it's a phrase. Why is a trigger word and can put people on the defensive. It's like, why is like justify yourself. And why, what if instead of using the word why or 5 whys, we change the word to what and 5 whats? And then Graham has responded to that great point. Why are you measuring that? Versus what are you trying to revenge or achieve with this measurement?
Yes.
Yeah. But the phrase that I like in there is the word trigger words, and some words that we use as sort of scientifically logical people can trigger other people, even though our intents are really, really, really good.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, and I like that. And actually, that might be something that I start to do too, because I'm actually reading a book at the moment. I don't have it here. It's a book by Warren Berger called The Book of Beautiful Questions. And it helps you to, adapt and ask more insightful and deeper questions and to build connections with people, but also to spark creativity, to resolve problems, etc. So, the 5 whats are actually, I'm going to dwell on that. Think about how I can use it. Thank you.
That's really clever. And I love the idea that you can buy a book and it teaches you skills for most of us aren't born with. And it's kind of like those skills of, you have a toolkit with diagrams and stuff, say, but then you have a toolkit of questions and how to ask them. Yeah, it's lovely. Okay. Sorry, I love the smiley face, and I'll stop interrupting. Keep going.
Okay. So our 4th obstacle is this more kind of vague one, and the one that I struggled with the most, which was about the we think we know. And I'm going, well, how do we get from the obstacle of we think we know to this new mindset of every situation can be substantially improved? And it really took me a while to get my head around it. But basically what it's saying is that when we think that we already know everything there is to know about a situation or a problem, then we limit ourselves to thinking about it in a different way. And if we're limiting ourselves to thinking about it in a different way, we're obviously limiting ourselves to thinking of a different solution. And what we find, because we're always also thinking about, this ever-going quest to always continuously improve. And if you're looking to improve something, but you already know all there is to know about this system, and there's really nothing to improve here, it's been functioning well for ages, what you spend your time doing is potentially like polishing the apple. You're doing these tiny little improvements around the edges, and at a particular point in time, you actually may just be, going into diminishing returns. Like, why put your efforts there? So the thing is, be open to rethink everything, because you want to assume that regardless of how long a system has been in place and how well it seems to be functioning, assume that there is always some other significant improvement that might be able to be made. You just haven't discovered it yet. So rethink everything. So you're going to ask questions and listen. You're going to think about what those big persistent problems are. You're going to expose the needs and the desires of every party or each of the parties that are involved in the conflicts. You're going to challenge all of those assumptions and the existing beliefs. You want to look for that root cause where all the issues converge. You also want to predict the future and anticipate what a future without those issues might look like. Even if they're tiny little issues, think about what it might look like. And that might actually be the launch pad to some great big idea and new opportunity for benefits. So that pretty much is the 4th obstacle removed. Don't think you know all there is to know about a system, and be open to rethinking. Go for broke, be ambitious, and really start to look for those significant or breakthrough improvements, even if, previously you thought, well, it's not there. We've already done all we can here. So sorry?
I think that's lovely. That's a nice last one here.
Yeah. So in summary, the living the full life was around what those meaningful successes are to you, the ability to overcome, failures and setbacks, generating, enjoying, recognizing opportunities. You want to build as many opportunities as possible, and you want to be able to collaborate with people. All of those things need you to think clearly and you're really building on your cause and effect thinking here and the tools that you've got to help you think clearly. And you want to remove these 4 obstacles. Reality is complex, conflicts are a given, we blame others and we think we know, and move yourself to a different mindset where perception of reality is simple. We know that conflict can be removed. We're always looking for a win-win solution. We're not wanting to compromise. And we recognize that we can be looking for substantial improvement everywhere. And as Clark said, this is where it all started. This is a picture of the trees and the notes on my wall. And as I come up with some other things or a bit of clarity, I stick a little, post-it note on there that helps me like dig a little bit deeper into it. So that's pretty much what people see. I've got like a gold tree at the top. Where's my thing? Like a gold tree at the top, which is similar to that illustration I just showed you. And then here is all of the actual logical trees and the cause and effect assumptions. This is a bit of a mishmash of a current reality tree and a future reality tree, for those of you who know those structures. But this is what worked for me in terms of helping me dissect and understand it. And just as a final point, if you do go onto Clark's website and have a look at his interview with Eli Goldratt, the conversation about the choice is just one small nugget of that interview. It's not the entire interview. So anyway, that's where I picked it up. And also I was thinking when I was going through this, many of us may have heard of Occam's razor. And if you haven't, go and, Google it. But it is a good way to also, as a shortcut to think about that mindset shift from complexity to simplicity. Another razor, which I stumbled upon, I didn't know this one before, but this one I think about as it's Hanlon's razor, and this one I kind of think about in conjunction with that 3rd obstacle of not blaming people. And Hanlon's razor is really along the lines of don't attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. If you expand that out a bit, you could also say carelessness or ignorance.
Yep.
And also while I was doing some work on this, one of the things that came into my, landed in front of me was this thread from Erin Westgate about what makes life good. And one of the things, it was a bit of a study she was doing. And one of the things that she said was another factor of what is life good is having a psychologically rich life. And some of the points that you guys wrote in the chat earlier on indicated to me that there is some thought there about psychologically rich. But anyway, it was just a bit of an interesting kind of thread of tweets, if you wanted to have a look at that. Yeah. And that's it. That's the Whistle Stop Tour. Remember, as I said, I've just done it really superficially. If you're interested and you really want to learn more, please go and read the book, The Choice. You'll find a lot of, better, deeper insight into it. Yes, thank you, Clark.
Yeah.
And I hope you walk away with something about, maybe thinking about what your current perception of reality is, and if there are any of those obstacles that you're experiencing right now, what you might be able to do to start shifting your mindset. Go
Lovely
on and
job, that was a beautiful job. You can breathe now. Go. I want to correct you on something. You made a terrible mistake right at the end. You said this was a superficial visit of this book. It wasn't superficial. You simplified up. I think you didn't dumb it down. You simplified up. It wasn't superficial. I found that really, really, really helpful. And there's been some interesting stuff in the chat there. And I'm wondering if you guys feel like coming on and actually, how about we take your slide away, Linda?
Because then I can look at you guys rather than my screen. Where's my mouse? Hang on.
There we go.
Cool.
If you guys feel like contributing, that would be cool. Or if you don't have to. But I'm wondering, Yusi, you had a little comment about thinking and feeling in there. I'm wondering if you would mind if I remind you what the comment was. You said it's not only learning to rethink, but also to refeel.
Yeah.
I thought really, really insightful. Could you add some more words to it?
Yes. Thank you for for liking my little comment. Uh, what I have seen over and over and over again is that quite often in corporate settings, in teams that work together well or not so well, they focus on things, and they forget that deep down there are those feelings and emotions that actually I was just yesterday night thinking that okay, your mind can be as sharp as a knife, but if your heart is hard as a stone, the knife doesn't cut anything through.
Mm.
And then that's I have seen it happening over and over again. I was lucky to be in one corporate job few years ago where I've never seen anything as toxic as I saw there. The general manager, she was absolutely horrific, and every attempt to cut that heart by any logic was futile.
Mm.
And in those kind of situations, you need to take the discussion to a new level. And what Linda, you said about those motivations or intentions, good intentions, you also need to then surface those intentions that those needs that cause harm.
Yes.
And you need to have emotional readiness to confront, not from your false assumptions, but from compassion and wisdom and courage.
Mm.
And then you
I like
can start to build something. As an old theater director, I always remember those situations where I had an actor or actress who couldn't, perform. Once we had a play. I was radio theater director, and we had one of the most famous actresses in Finland in the studio, and I was assisting director, and the director was forceful guru in his field, really. I was his assistant and worshiping him, but I could also see that his pressure, intention to get best out of that person, destroyed the whole attempt.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Mm.
that person, that famous actress, couldn't do her job.
Yeah.
And that was 40 years ago, and still that memory is with me, reminding me that if you have a conflicting situation, or if you have a situation where you need to get best out in people, you need to refeel the whole situation. You need to explore your own feelings, and then you need to explore their emotions,
Yeah.
and go and
I'm
only
expecting
after
another
that.
plug, Linda.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I'm expecting
Oh, you're
another
expecting
plug.
another plug.
Because that's
I was just
I
gonna-
absolutely have to agree. Because to say good intentions, everyone has good intentions. Sorry, good intentions are personal, right? It depends
Yes.
on your temper, and temperament has a big factor in what your intentions are. By the way, can I just add something? I mean, this thing about being anti-compromise. I grew up in America, so I did my original schooling, and my kids. And the main thing you learn about American history is, and one of the major reasons for America's success as a country, and we have to admit it has been very successful, was the fact that it was able to achieve continuous compromises in this political system. And there's this pretty good argument to say that America has now started becoming weaker because, in fact, it started with the impeachment of Nixon, followed by the impeachment of Clinton. And now impeachment, which is a very rare event in American history, is now being tossed up all the time. And it's mainly because the two parties, big parties in America, the Democrats and the Republicans, they're polarized. There is no spirit of compromise, right? And I think that's, and that's what I'd say. And compromise is a solution. And secondly, the whole science of economics, which I did for a year at Cambridge, was talked about the fact there was insufficient resources to satisfy all the demands. right? And that's a that's just the reality. The demands by people are insatiable, etc. And and the whole essence of science is how do you get there? Well, what's economics has come up is with the pricing mechanism.
Chris,
that equates.
Sorry,
I'll stop there.
Thanks. But that contribution was really useful, because I think it also helps us just to, if I can hone back in on the compromise. We're not saying that compromise is bad as such. You absolutely, you don't want to have one person, like one party, getting what they need at the expense of somebody else, or neither of you getting anything, because you just can't come anywhere in the middle. And if compromise is all you can do, compromise is all you can do, but at least you've got somewhere. What the point was that if you always strive to go to compromise, you are limiting yourself to actually being creative and thinking bigger than that solution. And so that's what the point about compromise was. It's not that it's bad per se, but just be aware that it is a factor in limiting you to exploring bigger and greater opportunity for wins for both sides.
Hey, can I ask you a question there, Chris? Because I know your work is on emotional intelligence and all around that area. So this is your kind of, this is your expertise, the whole people, getting them working together. As I was listening to this, I thought of, so if I could just show you that there was, I think there's something to do with maturity here. That this is one of the earliest, this is the earliest version of the gold that I can find. And doesn't even, this is before Ali got egotistical and put his picture on every cover. This is what he looked like probably 30 years after this was written. And as I was listening to this, your train track picture, Linda, it felt like those were the thoughts of a mature person, someone who got wisdom by spending a life, and getting to his 60s and then sitting down going, I was successful in it. And then he's kind of figured out kind of the stuff that was going, on in his head. And this is a recurring theme I have. I think I'm either getting stupider or wiser, and maybe it's both. But there's something about having lived life where you can actually think these things through there. And I was wondering, Chris, I haven't really got a question for you. I just wondering if you could maybe react to that. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on maybe wisdom and maturing and growing older and working with people and all that kind of stuff.
Well, actually, let's say life's journey. Like that thing when I said about getting educated, raise a family, write a book, but that's an old Chinese proverb, right?
Oh, is it?
Now, okay, so that's what I said. Getting educated, the big lesson of education is you never stop learning, right? That to me that's education. Raising a family, why that's important as well, it keeps the human race going. But the one group of people who tell you, well, the sort of people who tell you the truth, is one, in my case, the wife. And then secondly, even more important, is the children. But thank goodness they have children and they love their grandparents, thank God. Writing a book, well, that doesn't mean you actually write a book. What it means is you leave something behind for posterity, right? Right. Now,
yes.
That's effectively it. Now, what I could actually say is I worked for 25 years as a venture capitalist. In fact, but that's a longer story. I won't put it to life. And sort of I can say, well, I created basically some very successful companies, employment for say like 3,000 or 4,000 people. But if you ask me what my biggest two achievements are in my life, as I say, success, is when I got the rules on daylight saving, I helped change those. Right, and God gave us everyone an extra hour earlier, right? The second thing is probably major achievement was I got the capital gains tax change in Australia, right? Because that's right. The big thing is when it used to be it was indexed to inflation, etc. But it was you were taxed at your marginal tax rate, right? And I said that's a killer. I realized from looking at America, the biggest change in America, the whole reason of the American expansions is they dropped the capital gains tax rate down to 18%. They just kept dropping it, right, in Clinton. And what happens is, and this is my big discovery in life, was the major source of seed and capital, et cetera, was basically investors recycling their money back in, right? That's what happens, right? And I mean, you know, and even you got dear old Richard Wisetek now doing the same thing, right? Is they actually recycle the money back in. And that's the big secret in California. Okay, that's the way. So you want the entrepreneurs, and they actually seed the startups, right? That's what actually gets going, because they you know, they think they've got the answer. They have the same success stories as arrows, but that keeps the concentration. Whereas, you know, hate to say it, when government tries to say, oh, we're going to start innovation, very hard for massive bureaucracies to do that. I'm not saying they don't play a big role, which they do, but etc. Anyway, that's just my thought. But my attitude on people, the basic big thing of learning is, one, to learn that everything in moderation. I mean, don't let emotions control you. But on the other hand, do keep in exactly that point the guy said, use your intuition. And probably my big change is, whenever I have to make a major decision now, I say, right, I'm going to do X, but let me wake up tomorrow morning and say, am I still happy with that decision?
Yeah,
that's a very good idea. Lovely.
And that to me
Thank you very much.
That's it. I will say no more, sir.
Sorry, I just wanted to summarize on the back of Chris and Jussi. It is absolutely true that you do need to bring your emotion and sensitivity to all of these conversations that you're having with people, because if we remember that big thing about being able to collaborate with people, if you've got no idea how to interact with people, you're never going to be able to collaborate with people, let alone all those other things that you've got to do. So one of the things that I always try to remind people is, yes, this is a set of logical thinking process tools, but it doesn't mean that there's no emotion allowed in the conversation or in the thinking of the process.
Yeah,
so thanks.
I love that.
Yeah,
I think it's a really good place probably just to wrap up there, because it's not just there are lots of tools in your toolkit, and some of them are actually just a smile. And an inviting smile, ears, those things are far more important sometimes than the diagrams. You will never get to them. Yeah, okay, lovely. Hey, thank you everyone for dialing in. Thank you everyone who's watching in the future, which is really very exciting. Still don't know quite how that works. Thank you, especially Linda. That was really well put together, and it was I personally, I think that was so much more accessible than this book, but you have actually coaxed me to go and reread the book again.
Well, as Elliot said and others say, standing on the shoulder of giants. I just took what was there and made it accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So thank you so much. That was a really good job. If we just do the quick 3, 2, 1, and then what I'll do is I'll press the end meeting button. And thank you for the comments in the background that have been coming through the chat. That's always helpful, keeps the conversation going. So, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day. 3, 2, 1.